Hello, Anne. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for our September virtual art opening. Before we get started, I just want to remind you to keep your audio on mute until the very end of the presentation when we'll have a question and answer period and we can all just visit. Our featured artist this month, as you all know, is Anne Smith Stephan. We're very excited to be hosting this exhibit of her new work entitled Solitude. For those of you who haven't met Anne before, and I'm thinking there's not too many of you, but I'll just say a few little words about her. She lives and paints in Wilmette. She's been a working artist for many years, and we have represented her work here at the gallery for the last 3 years. Anne has also been an art instructor, teaching painting classes at the Evanston Art Center. So welcome, Anne.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I thought that we would get started by having you read some of your artist statement while we look at a video of the exhibit. And then we'll go through a series of questions that you'll answer. And I'm asking the audience, who I'm sure is going to have a lot of questions, to hold your questions till the very end. And then we'll put you all back on audio and we can ask whatever questions you have of Anne. And after the video and after we've talked a little bit, we will be going through each individual piece in the exhibit. So you'll have a chance to see them all up close. So I'll start the video, and Anne, when I get this up, if you could then read your artist statement. So let's see. This is always the tricky part for me. What do you see?
Remember, you go to the bottom of the
Yeah.
share screen. Click there, double click up there.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Hit the button and we'll play. Okay, Anne.
All right, I will read my statement, which is, art is such a personal, creative endeavor, no matter what the form. Your memories of life are always with you. You paint what you see, what you experience, and what you know. I take these realities and create another world using some very conscious decisions and some others that are just below the threshold of sensation or consciousness.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. It's been a really strange last 6 months, and so many artists have really struggled with their work during the whole coronavirus. I'm curious about how you've been dealing with it and how it's impacted your work.
Actually, I'm so lucky that I have a studio in my home because it's enabled me to continue painting all the time. The biggest thing that has changed for me is that I've had a friend, Nancy Doman, who has come over every week for years to paint with me. And she does figurative painting and uses oil sticks, and it's very rough and interesting paintings. And I obviously do abstract, but did figurative painting. And it doesn't really matter when it comes right down to it. You do paint with space and line and form and lights and darks. And it doesn't matter what you're painting itself, it's how it looks and how you're creating. And she's a very good critique of mine, and I hope I am of hers. And we were together at the Evanston Art Center in classes for years. So I miss not having her here.
Yeah.
I think we may try in a couple of weeks just to see how it goes.
Yeah, but you've been able to create, and partly maybe because you knew you had this show coming, right? So you had to paint.
That did have something to do with it. Yeah.
Something to do with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. That's really helpful. I'm going to share screen here so we can start looking at some of your paintings. But I was wondering if you could kind of take us through your painting process. Tell us how your paintings develop. So,
So you look at a blank canvas and it's horrendous to look at a big, huge piece of white that you don't want to deal with. So I get out a big brush and a lot of very colorful paints, and I blanket that white canvas so that it's all different colors, and then I start working from there. And I know it doesn't look like it when you see the paintings, but there's a lot of color underneath. And that's how I think I get some depth in my paintings too, is that there's one that's an early stage. So there's more color in there than you might think when you actually see the finished product. And I then use palette knives, and I use a mixture of cold wax and Neo McGilp is the kind of medium I use. And I layer stuff and work on probably 2 or 3 paintings at least at a time, because the oil paint stays wet and I can work on it within a few days usually again, sometimes right away. It sort of depends on what I'm doing.
so Anne, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just think this is such a startling contrast. This is an early stage of In the Air, and this is, I lost my cursor, and here's the final version. So yeah. I think that really helps explain your process a lot. Can you just even like talk a little bit more about this?
What it is wanting color to come through and layer it on top with glazes. And I like to use transparency. And then sometimes I use it thicker and scrape back out of it so that you can see what was underneath. I paint in layers and over a long period of time. It's one of those things. People always ask, how long did it take you to paint that? And I can never answer that because they're all different and they all take a different amount of time, and I work on them in multitudes. So it's hard to say.
So I'm curious, in this picture of In the Air here, there's this, in the upper left-hand corner, there's this very dark area. Is that an area where you have scraped, or is that added color?
Probably both.
Okay.
And I can't see that corner because I have oh, there you go. Okay, yeah. Sometimes it's scraping, sometimes it's adding, it's usually layering.
Okay.
I mean, if there's something dark, in that center section,
right,
see where there's overlay
mm-hmm.
and stuff coming through from stuff mm-hmm. coming through from underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it adds a richness to the paintings.
Absolutely. Here's another example. This painting by the bay. Here's an early version of that. Mm-hmm. And you really see all the colors you've got in there. Yeah.
Yeah. There's pink in there, and there's a lot of yellow and some terracotta color at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it disappears, but some of it's always under there somewhere. There's still traces of pink in the sky, and cover the bottom with blue, but you know, it's layered. And I love doing that because you never know exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. And I like not knowing. It's part of the process that is wonderful for me.
Okay, well, another question I had for you is that you paint really exclusively abstracts now. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about when, I know that wasn't always the case. I'm curious when you started embracing abstract art and why.
Well, it's interesting. You know, way back in high school and college when I was painting, I did do abstract, but I always abstracted from something. Mm-hmm. And now I'm abstracting from my mind. So it's very different in that respect. And then I did do a lot of figure painting and did some very realistic painting and a lot of pen and ink and sculpture. And, you know, you go through years of doing that sort of thing. And then I had this exhibit at a lobby in a office building, and there were nudes in it. And there were people who were tenants in the building who complained about the nudes, saying it wasn't appropriate. So I thought, okay, I'm going to stop doing them as nudes. So I started doing fruit, and it wasn't really fruit. It was parts of bodies that were morphed into fruits. And then I moved from those, because that was abstracting, into total abstraction.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea that you abstract from your mind, that you're not abstracting from.
I'm not using, yeah, I don't
I've
use,
known, yeah, go ahead.
well, your mind is just so full of all your life experiences. And I don't use photos, and I don't go outside and paint from real life. I just paint from my mind, which is, so it's an interesting place to be sometimes. Not always, but mostly. Yeah.
Okay, well, now since I've known you, your work has gone from earth tones, oranges, to blacks, and now to blues and pastels. And so I'm just curious about the role of color in your work.
Oh, I think color is just the most wonderful thing about it, working in paints. And I love to use different colors all the time. And I did do all those wonderful earth colors for years. And then, you know, life changes and you go through things. And I went through this period of using a lot more black and gray, and was always told you can't use black. You have to make your own. And I thought,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I can use black, watch me. And so I did. And then I got, you know, through another stage in life and started using blues, which I had, but only in relationship to the earth tones.
Mm-hmm.
So now I was using blues, and I love the really deep, heavy blues. I think they're wonderful, but you can mix them with stuff. And then there's a lot of green and sort of, some of them have that pinky sky in them now, which I never thought I would do in a million years.
Yeah, they're so beautiful, they're so luminous.
And it's fun to do something different. It's hard to believe that after all these years, I can still think I can do something different. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Oops, I just kind of slow down. Okay, you've mentioned that some of the artists who inspire you are Matisse, Turner, and Diebenkorn. And can you tell us why those three and how their work has influenced yours?
Very different time periods, but
Mm-hmm.
very similar in many ways, I think. I think Turner was a remarkable, atmospheric, almost abstraction painter.
Mm-hmm.
And he painted in watercolors for years, but then he started painting in oil paints and doing these wonderful seascapes. And he did a lot of earth colors that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always have thought his work was so inspiring. And then you move on. I mean, I think Matisse probably was born shortly after Turner died. And so it's another whole generation of artists. And Matisse was just so prolific and so incredible in so many different ways. From all of his drafting and his drawings and his paintings and his color, talk about color. He was part of the Fauvism group for a while. He didn't like to be labeled, but he then got older and got into doing figures, but bolder and more abstract, and then started doing cutouts and did wonderful, whimsical things. So he just ran the gamut his whole life of trying everything. And I think it seems that he really loved doing it. And Diebenkorn, I think, loved what he did too. And he, again, I think probably, I don't know, he and Matisse may have crossed over for a few years.
Probably,
But,
yeah.
I think Diebenkorn, I loved his abstract work. And I tend to be more linear in my work. And he is very much that in his abstract work. But I loved all of his early figure paintings. And he, oddly enough, like me, went from abstract to figurative to abstract and found it wonderful to work in both worlds. And I think that it's great. Why get stuck somewhere?
Yeah. This painting that's showing right now, Distant World, I feel like is very Turner-esque. It's got that sort of churning sea and that atmospheric sky. And I know that's not what it really is, but I see that.
Sure. And the coloration at the bottom is more going back to some of my earth tones, which I may move toward again.
Well, that is the end of my questions. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say, Anne. And if there is, great. And if there's not, then we'll turn it over to everybody else for questions.
Oh, let them talk.
Everybody, you are now invited to turn on your audio. And if you don't know how to do that, I will try to do it for you. Let's see, stop the share.
Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
This is awesome. How fun.
I can see all of you and hear all of you, but you can't see me for some reason.
Hi.
Have you got a little button on your lower left?
Yeah, I've tried several things. It's
Oh,
not really happened before, but
Terry.
it's all right. I'm here.
okay, Terry. Good.
Muted if it's.
I
Recognize
have a
your voice.
question.
Oh, go ahead,
Okay.
Nat.
Being a word person, I'm curious about how you pick the titles. Do you start with an idea and paint to it, or do you 4 days in, do you think this looks like Distant Shore or whatever?
Oh, you mean all of the titles?
Titles.
Yeah, I think whenever you put them up on Instagram, I'm always fascinated by the titles.
Oh, I love to title my paintings.
Yeah.
And I really must say that sometimes I know what it's going to be beforehand, but most often not, because I don't know where it's going to end. I don't
Where
know
you're
where
going.
the painting's going to be when I'm finished. Boy, talk about another difficult thing. It's just say, when is it finished?
Yes.
It is a very difficult process, and I know some of the artists joining us know that. It's really up to you, and you think it's finished, and then you sit. I must say that you do spend a lot of time looking at your work. And I know people think that that's kind of weird, but you have to sit and look and think about it and decide what direction you might want to go. And that's also very much part of my process, is looking at it. And then I title them, and it just hits me, whatever. It's kind of random.
Well, you do a great job. I think your titles are very descriptive. And you sort of take it for granted, but I know so many artists who struggle mightily coming up with titles and don't come up with good titles. And
I know.
so it's actually a talent, it's a skill that you have to be able to do that.
Thank you. I enjoy that part actually too. I have a list. You should see my lists. I've got lists and notes and lists, and I have lists of possible titles that I go through and I add to. You know, and I had them for years.
Is there one that you're just dying to use and you haven't taken yet for?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. There was one, and it didn't fit any of these paintings, and I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I'm sure.
Feel free to just shout a question out, or if you'd prefer, you can use the chat button at the bottom of the screen, and then I'll read a question to you.
And this is Bob McDonald. Wanted to ask you, every work in this show is a pretty large format. How do you decide on what size canvas you work on?
Well, that's a good question. I have no idea. I buy lots of canvases and I kind of decide when I'm painting. I can't paint on two huge paintings at the same time, although I did for this show. But it's very hard in my studio to paint on two 4-foot by 5-foot paintings.
Mhm.
So I tend to paint on different sizes at the same time. And you fit the work to the size of the painting too, which is an interesting aspect of it. And then I've got the one in the double one in the show where I painted them both at the same time, one next to the other. I don't know why I decided to do it, but I did. And it's kind of fun to do a diptych.
Yeah. I could add too that these larger paintings that you've been doing have actually been selling quite well. So I think that
That's
might be
part
an
of-
additional incentive.
You do choose by what's selling out of your gallery, yes. And the big ones have definitely sold. It's been great.
Surely, surely sales have nothing to do with the creative process.
Of course not, Harold.
I don't like art. I just came for the mule. How do I get the mule?
Oh, I forgot to put the recipe on this time.
Oh, I wanted one myself. Yeah. Cynthia's husband, for those who don't know, and a lot of you are from out of town, which is wonderful. Cynthia's husband, Tom, was just waving. He makes drinks, special drinks when there's an opening at the gallery. He does a really good job of artistic drinks.
Thank you.
And the ginger beer costs more than the whiskey. It's
Yes, it does.
Oh, gosh.
I'd like to make a comment. We are the proud owners of some of Anne's art.
Oh my gosh.
And I am just so struck. Anne's been a friend for a long time, but I never understood why her paintings were so luminous until you talked about this tonight, Anne. I always feel like they glow from within. And I
Exactly.
thought, how does she do it? Well, it's because you start deep and move up. So thanks for explaining that to me after I bought this.
Well, it's interesting because I think I start with, as I said, a lot of color and they're kind of then get complicated compositions. And then I don't want them like that. I want to, so I simplify it all in the end. And that is how I work. And thanks, Ro. I love to have that brought to the forefront.
I feel the same way. I'd heard Anne describe her painting process many times, but until I saw those sort of before and after pictures, I didn't really understand quite what you were doing. I mean, I knew there were layers and I knew there were scraping, but I never would have guessed that some of the colors that were under there were under there. That was really.
And I do use a palette knife, and I use all different size palette knives, from little tiny ones to really big ones. And I don't use a brush other than sometimes in that very first putting down of color to cover white. And
Interesting.
I sometimes use rags, and I sometimes use my fingers.
Mhm.
It's amazing what you can use to push paint and rub it off and scrape it down. But the palette knives are what do the scraping. And I've just used them for so many years, and I can't imagine painting with a brush.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm really struck by how your description of process is so like the way writers describe their process, what I see and feel and know, conscious and unconscious.
Yes.
And you like not knowing what's going to happen. Those are all. But
Oh,
you know,
and you get writer's block too. Only
Well,
I get painter's block.
but I think writers might have an easier time of it if they had some rags and palette knives and some physical things to do.
Good point.
Big erasers.
You have a delete button.
Yes, a delete button.
That's an interesting thought, Kathleen. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Kathy being an actress and a writer herself.
Ah.
Yes.
And I have another question. How many pieces do you work on at the same time? You
Oh.
work on, several paintings at the same time, moving from one to another?
My conversation, yes. I have to, partially because it's oil paint. And it turns to mud. If you just keep painting into wet paint, it really does get ugly fast. So I work on one painting and set it aside, and then work on another, maybe 3 at a time. And then I can go back to them within a few days. And depending on what I want to do, I can go back the next day. And I use, as I said, I use some mediums. And I use glazing. I actually put a lot of medium into the paint sometimes. And then use the palette knife. It's feedback. What's happening?
I'm not sure what's happening there.
Can you put the mute on, C? Or
Well, I don't want to mute everybody.
No, that's okay. I think it's okay now.
Maybe you could do whoever wants to talk and everybody else could be muted.
or use the chat process?
Yeah, we could use the chat process because it is, okay, I've just muted you all.
Oh.
So just use the chat button at the bottom to ask a question.
Cynthia, how do we transfer to the paintings?
To see them again?
Yeah.
I have to put them up again.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm happy to do that. Or we can do that while we're talking.
Can you do that while you're talking? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
That
here
would be lovely.
Okay, let's see. I gotta find them. Of course I can't.
I mean, I've seen a lot of Ann's work, but I'm always look forward to see the new things.
All right, I'm gonna start at the beginning again. Were you here for the whole presentation, Harold, or just part of it?
Right. I tuned in at 15:15.
Okay, so this is the first one, and I'll just wait on each one a little bit and go forward.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I didn't mean to restrict the conversation at all.
No, it's actually fun to see them again. So
Yeah.
one of the things we were talking about is that Anne gave me some early stage photos of some of her pieces, and it was so remarkable to see how she goes from that and how that becomes that.
Yeah.
And even more striking how that one became that one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I have a third example. This one, the coloration stayed more similar, but the composition completely changed. So
Right.
it's really interesting. And then I'll go through the rest of these then. So
Yeah.
hopefully I'll have a chance to stop in and see them in person.
Yeah, I hope I get. Yeah, in fact, I'm hoping to get up there. I should call. We should call in advance, right?
No, I'm here, same normal hours.
Okay.
So anytime you want to stop by is fine.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question here, a couple of questions from Judith. And you have a sort of regular painting schedule. Can you hear me, Anne? Oh, Anne's muted. Anne, unmute yourself.
She can unmute her. You can unmute her.
You muted me, including everybody, and I forgot to unmute.
Sorry. So did you hear the question?
Repeat it, please.
Do you have a sort of regular painting schedule?
Oh, Judith, no. I am lucky enough, as I said, to have the studio here. So I'm not that disciplined, that I have work hours. And what I love is that I can go up there at night. I can go up there anytime during the day. And sometimes I get up there and I paint for hours. And then other times I get up there and I sit and I look and I think and I leave. So it's all kind of random, but I'm as I said, so lucky to have it up there. I say up there, it's on my 3rd floor, and it's got a skylight and a big ceiling fan and real high ceilings. So it's been a wonderful space all these years.
So Laura asked the question, she said she missed the beginning of the presentation and wondered if it's been recorded. And yes, it has been recorded, and it will be on the website, on our homepage on the website for the month. So you can listen to the whole thing.
Oh, great. Thanks, Sophia.
Absolutely. Any other questions, or anybody have anything they just want to chat about?
I have a question for you, Cynthia.
Okay.
You a couple of commented on how cool it is to see these in-process photos of the painting.
Yeah.
Is that something you have gotten from other artists, and do you think about that as part of the process? Like any painting we would own, would love to see or own the photo of the in-process.
You know, we have done it with one other artist. Not everybody takes photos as they go along, and not everybody paints over a long period of time. So for instance, I have the last show that we had here are people who call themselves experiential painters. And so they don't draw, they don't do layers and layers, they just sit down and they paint a painting. And so there's no in-betweens on those. So everybody's a little bit different. But I do think it's really interesting. And so to the extent that I can get that kind of information going forward, I will, because I think it's fascinating. So thank you for asking that.
I got to get around to painting just once. I'll call it done. It would be so nice to do them faster, but I like what I do. I won't change.
That's not yours. That's not your, what you do. Yeah.
No.
And, you know, and again, we talked about that luminosity that you have in your colors with the glazes and everything. Well, that requires layers. That
Yes.
These other paintings don't have that kind of quality. So they have a different type of quality, which is a very immediate quality, which is wonderful unto itself, but it's a different thing. I have another question here. Do you ever have a piece that disappoints you and ends in the trash? Or do you rework a piece until you're happy with it? That's from Tom.
Yes. Thank you, Tom. Some do end in the trash. Yeah. I've saved many, many things over the years. And I used to work in pastels at one point and have figure paintings in pastels. They're hard to keep, but I have trashed some of the, I mean, yeah, the ones on paper you can just rip up. That's okay. The big ones on canvas are a little harder to dispose of. But yeah, if they're disappointing, it's not worth keeping. And you know, that's people, in being in class was fun at the Evanston Art Center, partially because you're around other artists and you're always talking art, which is great. And drawing from the figure was great for me. And it just doesn't, I don't do that anymore. So I finally left that class because I was not, it was crowded. There were a lot of people who loved Eleanor Spies Ferris. I don't know if you know who she is. She taught at the Evanston Art Center. And I wasn't using the model anymore. So I finally left, which is a shame. But I have a lot of drawings from the contour, fast drawings that I did. And I just came across some the other day. And I suppose I'll keep them. You know, kids, what are you going to do with them?
Well, here's a question that just occurred to me. Do you varnish your paintings when they're finished, or do you not? You don't. Okay. So you can always,
and now that I'm using cold wax too, it's
oh, that's true.
kind of
We didn't even talk about wax. You should talk about that a little bit.
well, it's truly just a wax that is, but I mix it because I don't want it right out of the can, and because I paint on canvas, you actually can't. If you're going to use it right out of the can, you got to paint it on a stiff board. But I've painted on boards, but I like painting on canvas. So I mix it with another medium. And I mix it to a consistency that I like. And it works really well for me. It's an interesting medium. And it does kind of put a finish, a flatter finish on some of the paintings.
So you're saying you use wax as a finishing coat. Is that what you're saying? No.
Sorry.
You- with your
It's a medium that I mix into my paints.
Okay.
And that's how I can get a really thin layer that I can glaze with. And, you know, if I don't put as much in, then it's thicker and comes out a different consistency. And that I play around with as I go.
It also stretches the paint if you.
Sure, into a glaze if you
Right.
use a lot of it, yeah.
And did you learn to do that somewhere? Or is that something you just developed on your own, or how did you come to start using wax?
I've always used a medium with my paints. Used to be that I wanted to extend the time that they stayed wet,
Oh,
but you could use a medium that kind of closes down the time it stays wet. And now I don't know, it's morphed again into this over a period of years. And I've used a lot of different mediums, and this I really like, and it's worked well for me. So you just play around with a lot of stuff over time.
yeah.
And it's been a long time.
Harold, did you have another question?
Yes, it's interesting to hear the term experiential painting. I've never heard that term. I think taking classes, which I've done for a long time, because there's a wonderful synergistic effect of taking classes, but it does tend to make you want to finish a painting within a class period. So you, you sort of work at it from that point of view. Lately, not taking classes, I've been spending much more time on specific paintings, and I'm having the experience, and Anne, I wonder if you have this experience. I have this experience of painting maybe 3 or 4 hours on something, coming back the next day to look at my the wonderful thing that I accomplished the day before, and find that it ain't so wonderful after all, you know, and so you just sort of start painting over, which is a good thing in itself. But do you sometimes come back the next day and think, why in the world, how could I have done this? You know?
Yes, of course I do. And the opposite is also true. I leave thinking, oh, what a disappointment this day has been. And then I go back up there the next day and think, that's not that bad. So it does work both ways. But I do know what you mean about class. I always took my paintings home with me and painted.
Yeah.
Continued at home to do stuff so that you weren't confined to that 3 hours.
Today I was going to paint over something, but at first I turned it upside down, and I thought, gee, this is not so bad after all, you know.
Right.
There
Turn
you
it
go.
upside down or look at it in a mirror. If you hold it up to a mirror,
Right.
it gives you a different perspective. And
Well,
yeah.
Did someone else have a question? Otherwise, I was going to say, thank you very much. This has been wonderful. Really learned a lot and enjoyed seeing all of you, and hope that you'll tune in again next month.
And thank you all for coming.
Congratulations, Anne.
Loved it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Yes. give it a clap.
Fabulous work, Anne.
Thank you, Ann.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Just gorgeous.
Bye from
Bye,
Sydney.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye from Sydney. Yes. Did you know there's somebody from Sydney, Australia here?
Oh my gosh, that's impressive.
Yes. Thanks, Rich.
Now I don't want to press the end meeting button.
Hi, Rose.
And do you want to have a second to see, look at who everybody is that's here?
Do I want to what?
Do you want to look to see everybody who's here before I end the meeting?
No, you can end the meeting. I know who's here. I see-
You do? Maybe you want to know who's not here. Who didn't come?
I know who.
Yeah, is it possible to visit the gallery in person right now? What are the rules about that?
Absolutely. We have been open since May 29th. We observe all protocols, so you have to wear a mask.
Okay,
You're not allowed to have more than 6 people in the gallery at any one time. But yes, we'd love to see you.
great, we'll be by. Thank you.
Thanks.
Congratulations, Anne.
Thanks, Steph.
All right, I'm going to press the magic button right now.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.